Hello gamers, Powered Heal here, and today we're going to talk about the AQ Phase 5 kinda BiS, as I like to call it. So this is going to be just a look at the BiS list from the perspective of kind of like a more realistic perspective. Like, a lot of people aren't going to be able to get all the BiS items they want in a given tier, so we're kind of going to go through the list again, and we're just going to talk about some swaps that I made that I think are pretty reasonable and should be, pretty attainable for you guys, or point out some of the things that you might really want to try and get, and some alternatives along the way. And we'll do a little bit of like changing, like there's some items in this list that I want to kind of like go over and show you even more alternatives on, right? So we'll kind of like start on the top here like we did before. And this is one where I really think you should try and get this item because it's just a fantastic head slot item. So I don't really want to recommend anything else in this slot. If you really can't get this, you can use your tier 2 helm, but this is pretty good. And you should definitely try and get it at some point before the tier is over, or even when you're still like kind of going into Nax and stuff, if you don't have your tier 3 helmet by then. So for the amulet, this is one that's really easy. Amulet of the Shifting Sands, like I mentioned in the first video, it drops from the last boss of AQ 20, and it's just one of those things where you turn in his head, you get the item. It's actually the same for the Amulet of Fallen God, where Cthulhu drops his eye, I believe it is, and you turn that in for an item, which can be Amulet of Fallen God, but the problem is there's a lot more loot competition for this, and it only drops once a week, whereas this basically drops like at least twice a week. So it's just a lot easier to get this neck. It's pretty much well respected as a healer neck. You're not really going to be fighting many other people for this neck outside of other healers. And if you're running in a guild especially or something like that, you'll get this very quickly. Especially if people already have the ZG neck. In my opinion, the ZG neck and this are fairly interchangeable. This one is better, but they're very similar, right? So if somebody already has the ZG neck in your guild, it's unlikely that your guild is going to allow them to roll on this before you if you have a bad amulet. It just doesn't make any sense. So, yeah, this is a fantastic kind of option, and it's only like 10 healing down of effective stats from this amulet, so it's obviously, you're not even going to notice that at all. For the shoulders here, I mean, you obviously want the pauldrons. I think these are pretty good. If you don't have the pauldrons, and obviously you don't have the AQ40 pauldrons here, then you could use the confessors drop from ZG. This should be super easy to get, and it's basically the exact same as the trans pauldrons. I mean, it's basically the same item when you look at it. It just doesn't have the fire resist on it. And the nice thing about this is if you don't have the neck yet, right, you can use the neck to get the 2-piece, or you can use another one of the ZG items to get the 2-piece, or if you have the ZG Trinket equipped, you can get the 2-piece from just having the shoulders on. So using the ZG shoulders can be quite decent in a lot of cases. So if you don't have the trans shoulders here, don't fret. Shroud of Pure Thought, this is obviously something that we have in this slot over the Cloak of Clarity. Now, you may still need things like Rejuvenation Gem and stuff in Blackwing Lair, so you may not feel comfortable giving up any sort of prio for an item like Shroud of Pure Thought. If that's the case, you can easily just go with Hide of the Wild. And if you can't afford Hide of the Wild, still something like the Cloak of the Cosmos, it's not going to be something that you really notice the difference about like that bad, right? And also now they even have options like this, Cloak of the Hikari Aloha Cloak, right? This is actually probably way easier to get than Cloak of the Cosmos because nobody's running DM West. So something like this, it's basically like close to 2 MP5, 33 healing, and some intellect. I mean, this is basically just what you would use, right? If you did not have access to Shroud of Pure Thought or higher. And there's this. This is actually kind of decent as well. This comes from AQ 20. So you have a lot of cloak options at this point, and don't really worry too much about Cloak. Robes the Guardian Saint. So this is pretty good if you don't have True Faith. If you have True Faith, I feel like the the emphasis you're putting on this goes way down, if that makes sense. And I feel like, this is an item where you can realistically even use Robes of Transcendence in its place. 7 MP5 is, not a trivial amount of MP5 when we're talking about one item, so it's pretty decent in that respect. But we're really only talking about one item slot in this case, right? If you were to drop 7 MP5 from every item, then yeah, it's kind of bad. But if you had to drop 7 MP5 from this one item, I don't think it's really the end of the world. And you may not even have to do that, like I said, if you already have the True Faith Vestments. By this point in the game, you don't really need the int as much, especially if you're in a guild that's kind of going fast and stuff like that. You don't really have a chance to remax your mana. This is a very equivalent item. And honestly, even if you don't have this item already, it could be worth it for you to make this item now because it's probably very cheap. The pattern probably doesn't drop a ton anymore because there's probably not a ton of people running Strat Live, although I guess some still do it for orbs. So you could probably find the pattern really cheap. Yeah, it'll just be the crafting costs and the leveling costs for tailoring. So an option to consider here. Going into the bracers. So the bracers, these are just here because, again, you want 3-piece in any set you're going to run. So we just chose these for this particular 3-piece. But if you didn't have them, you could use something like the Confessor's Wraps. The Van Bracers of Prophecy are probably pretty cheap nowadays. But yeah, we're just using these for the 3-piece. The Augur Staff here. This is a very underrated item. Now, if you're already rank 14, you're not really gonna have to worry about this, right? Because I would say that you could make the argument that the Augur Staff is better, but even if you want to make that argument, like I would probably actually be of the opinion the Augur Staff, in particular on Priest, is better than the rank 14 Hammer and the Offhand, because what we're gonna say here is, like, let's say you run the rank 14 Offhand, the rank 14 Hammer, which is 134 healing, and then you run the Offhand, which is 53, okay? So we're 89 at this point, 189, and then we also we're 9 MP5, I think, at that point. Yeah, we're 9 MP5. So 9 MP5 and 189. So we're losing about, like 50-ish, 56 healing. And we're gaining 6 MP5, and we're also gaining Intellect, which is not the greatest stat, but it's... So you're basically trading like 50 some healing for around 6 MP5, which in my opinion is not a terrible trade. You could definitely make the argument that the High Warlord is setup is slightly better, but I think this is a very comparable setup, and I think it's going to be very easy to get, which is why I want to make you aware of this item. In the other BiS video, I made the claim that this comes from the armaments. That's incorrect. It comes from the Regalia, but the idea is they're very similar. So the Regalia is like the caster version of the item that drops. You turn it in, you pick like a caster weapon, and then the armaments is a melee version where it has the battle axe that the warriors sometimes get, the Kawaji battle axe. It has the Pugio, which is the dagger for rogues. And there's some other items that are mixed in on both of those. But this should be relatively easy to get because a lot of people did go for rank 14 this time around, and the rank 14 is pretty much always going to be better than this option, especially for the caster weapon, because the caster rank 14 weapon is way better than the caster staff you get from the Regalia. Now the healing, the Augur Staff is like I said, it's similar to the rank 14, but in particular the caster staff is a lot worse. So casters probably aren't going to be super invested in rolling on this item, if that makes sense, or soft resing it or anything like that. So this is something that, especially if you have like a soft res situation, this is a very good pickup because you can just snag this probably quickly early on and then immediately transition your soft reses into things like the Scepter, right? Whereas if you are in a guild situation, it's a little bit trickier maybe because, you probably feel like you're going to be giving up prio on the Scepter to get something like this. So you may want to keep that in mind and talk to your guild leader about like, hey, I'll use an Augur Staff if Regalia drops, but I don't want to give up prio on the actual the main scepter that everybody wants. I want to be able to roll on that as well. So you'd have to communicate that to your GM basically. But this is a very good intermediary weapon. I'll probably end up using this on my priest because I don't think I'm going to have him go rank 14. Unless I obviously get the good scepter. So the gloves, I have prophecy gloves here because I think you're absolutely fine just using these basically for the entire tier. It's kind of weird. I think a lot of people look at this and it's like, well, you have like you're not even using these towards the set bonus, right? You just have one piece of prophecy, but it's like, I would only upgrade these probably if I had everything else I wanted in this tier, right? Because when you look at it, compare these to the gloves I would use are gloves of the Messiah, okay? And so 26 healing, 10 MP5, and there's no spirit. So when we do the spirit calculations for the spiritual guidance, we basically get 21 healing, potentially 22 depending on how it rounds. So we're 4 to 5 points healing different, which is basically nothing between the two gloves. We're 2 intellect different, which is basically nothing. And we are 1 MP5 different around there when we factor in the spirit on the gloves. Basically, it's like 5 spirit to 1 MP5. Okay, so we basically gain 3 additional MP5, so we're at 9 MP5 instead of 6. Which means that we're only down 1 overall. So again, just very, very close gloves here. And there's just no reason really to spend any prio on Gloves of the Messiah when you can just have your Gloves of Prophecy, right? And like I mentioned in the other video, there is Gloves of Dark Wisdom here. Now these are going to be an AQ 20, so you're probably not going to be paying with 40-man prio for 20-man gloves. So if you want to get these, if you prefer the extra plus healing, to the MP5 you're going to get out of the prophecy gloves, then that's absolutely fine. Feel free to do that as well. Coming into the belt slot, this is one that I think you should definitely grab. Like if there's 2 normal armor pieces you should get, it should be Grasp of the Old God and the helmet here. This is just a fantastic belt. It dwarfs the other belt. Like let's compare it to the trans belt. So you're not even getting 2 MP5 really, and you're down more than 30 healing. Okay, you have a little bit more intellect. You also have shadow resistance, which is not useless, but I tend to think tends not to be as good as fire resist. Although in the raids that are coming up, shadow resistance is going to be more effective than it would be in the current raids for the most part. So that is something to keep in mind. But realistically, this belt is just insane. And Firemark's Clutch is pretty decent over here, but this is another item that's you probably didn't get in Blackwing Lair anyway. And the Woodbine Cord is obviously still decent, right? It's probably like the Woodbine Cord and Firemark's Clutch are the 2 things that are closest to this, but this is just still quite better. So this is something that I would try and get. Leggings of Transcendence, you should probably already have these. If not, try and get them. Definitely one of the best pieces of Tier 2 that you pretty much use throughout the entire game. So, not much to say about those. Then, Boots of Transcendence. This is, again, if you don't have Boots of Pure Thought, these are great, right? Because you can just easily proc your 3-set here. They're basically the next best boots. These boots are good that drop in EQ 20. They're technically like a little bit better than Boots of Transcendence for the pure healing, but in a lot of cases, if it's between this or Boots of Transcendence, you're just going to want to use the Boots of Transcendence, as it's going to allow you to use a more powerful item in some other slot, and it's going to basically take care of your 3-set for Transcendence, right? Now, going on to the gloves here, or not the gloves, the rings. So the ZG2 set, in my opinion, is quite good, even into Nax. So that's something you can always have in your back pocket. ZG has been around for quite a while now, so it's probably going to be even easier to get than it normally would be. So that's something to keep in mind there. However, if you don't have that, you don't want to get it, Signet of the Bronze Dragonflight is quite good. This is the item that you just basically get from doing the raid. As you kill stuff in the raid, your reputation increases, and then it's basically like the AV Trinket where it just upgrades. So this is the Trinket the ring at the Exalted level, and as you can see, it's really good. So you can use this with something like Pure Elementium Band. You can use this with something like Caught Band. I think the idea is, let's say that you have something like Caught Band, Pure Elementium Band, or you're getting Ring of the Martyr, right? One of those three. So you have one of those three big rings. Those are kind of the heavy hitter rings, right? Then having Signet of the Bronze Dragonflight as the second ring in that pairing is pretty decent. And I would use the Signet of the Bronze Dragonflight plus Cauterizing Band plus Ring of the Martyr or plus Pure Elementium Band over the ZG2 set in most cases, right? So I think that's really where this comes in, is you want to try and pair it with one of the good rings. This ring is like okay. It's kind of reminds me of the Signet of Blackrock here, but realistically, you tend not to kill the boss that drops this. Well, you kill the boss, but it has to be killed in a certain order, I believe, to drop this ring, and usually you don't kill it in that order. So just something to note there. This probably isn't going to be available to you in most cases. But yeah, I would just keep an eye out for any of these three rings and try and pair it with this, and you will be golden ring-wise for a bit. Certainly into Nax. Trinket-wise, there's not really good AQ20 trinkets. You're basically working with the same things you've always had. You're probably going to, if your trinkets are bad, you want this as like a mainstay. If you can afford Dark Moon Card Blue, Dark Moon Card Blue is really good, especially if you don't have other good alternative trinkets. Getting tongue-tied here. However, don't be afraid to cycle trinkets as well, right? It's not that hard to get a Heart of Hakar nowadays, I feel like. Heart of the Hakar can be really useful. If you picked up some of the ZG pieces for the ZG trinket the first time around, but you didn't get all of them, maybe you can get all of them now, right? Because there's going to be less people wanting those. So that's huge. And yeah, so keep in mind that you can just swap trinkets if you don't have good ones. So that's the main thing I would say about trinket slots if you're struggling there. And then the wand slot, we have Wand of Eternal Light. So again, this is like slightly worse than Antenna here. I mean, honestly, depending on what you value, you could maybe even argue that this is better, but I think I would say that technically speaking, this is slightly worse. But this can honestly be pretty expensive. Like, I've seen this go for 1k gold. I'm not sure what it's going to go for this time around. The problem is it doesn't really drop very often. So it could get really expensive. The thing is, healers are notorious for not wanting to pay expensive premiums on items, because I think most of them are smart enough to realize that, paying like 3k gold for this item is probably not going to be worth it unless you buy gold or you have a ton of excess gold. Like, I might buy this for 1k just because I have a ton of gold, but I wouldn't really recommend that you guys buy it for that if you don't have a lot of gold on your character. I think it's much better to save it for consume, save it for Nax when you're going to be needing to use it on some of the mats for the tier pieces and stuff like that. So this is a fantastic alternative option if you don't have the gold for this. And yeah, I think that this is something you could probably have a guildie help you with. I'm not sure. At this point in the game, it's probably pretty easy to like duo, especially if you use like invis pots and stuff. Maybe you can get, if you do it with a rogue, I could see maybe being able to get to the coffers or something like that, or maybe you can even just get their duo. And the drop rate in this is pretty good, so you don't have to worry too much about it not dropping. You shouldn't have to do it too many times. But yeah, that's basically the BiS-ish list. So if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them down below. If this helped you in any way, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. It helps me. And yeah, thank you guys so much, and I will talk to you guys next time. See you.